That amazing quote comes from David Dunning himself, one of the psychologists who actually discovered the very effect we're talking about today. And wow, is it a perfect place to start? Hello to all viewers of my channel. Today, we are diving deep into one of psychology's most famous and, let's be honest, most misunderstood ideas, the Dunning-Kruger Effect. You know, it's that fascinating, kind of weird cognitive bias that explains why sometimes the people with the least skill are brimming with the most confidence. All right, let's just get right into it with a version you've probably seen all over the internet, the one that's become a pop culture staple, often shown as that infamous graph with the peak called Mount Stupid. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right? It's become the go-to insult on social media. You see it in the comment section everywhere. It's this quick, sharp way to just shut someone down by basically saying they're too ignorant to even understand their own ignorance. And it's punchy for sure, but it's not really the whole story. And that, right there, is the big question. When we peel back all those layers of memes and online jabs, does the real science actually back up this idea of just stupid people? Or is there something way more subtle and, honestly, way more universal going on? To figure that out, we have to go back to where it all began, that groundbreaking 1999 study by two psychologists, David Dunning and his grad student at the time, Dunning-Kruger. They were trying to test this idea that thinkers for centuries had noticed, that somehow being ignorant can make you feel even more confident than being knowledgeable does. So their experiment was actually pretty simple, but brilliant. They got a bunch of college students and gave them tests on things like logic, grammar, and even how well they could spot a good joke. Then they did the most important part. They just asked the students to guess how they did compared to everyone else. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. They looked at the people in the bottom quarter, the lowest 25% of scorers. On average, their actual test scores put them way, way down at the 12th percentile. So, not great. But, and this is the kicker, when they were asked to guess where they ranked, they thought they had crushed it. They estimated their performance was way up at the 62nd percentile. I mean, that's not just a little off. That is a huge, massive overestimation of their own skills. So why this gigantic gap? Well, the researchers said it all comes down to a single concept, metacognition. It's a fancy word, but it basically just means self-awareness. It's that voice in your head that lets you step back and accurately judge your own performance. And when that's missing, well, that's the key to the whole Dunning-Kruger effect. Dunning and Kruger called this the dual burden, or sometimes the double curse. Think of it like this. First, a person just isn't good at something. But second, that very same lack of skill also prevents them from being able to see their own mistakes. The tools you need to do something well are often the exact same tools you need to recognize how well you're doing it. And here is where we have to make a really important shift. It's so easy to hear all this and point fingers, thinking, oh, I know people like that. But the real science shows this is about something we all do. This is so crucial. The Dunning-Kruger effect is not about being stupid. It's about specific skills. You could be a genius physicist who completely overestimates their ability to cook a decent meal. You could be an award-winning artist who thinks they're a financial whiz, but they're not. We all have these blind spots, these areas of incompetence, and inside those blind spots, this effect can totally get us. And if you want the perfect illustration of this point, listen to this quote from David Dunning himself. The guy who co-discovered the effect openly admits that he's a victim of it too. It's a fundamental part of being human. We literally don't know the limits of our own ignorance. But here's the thing. The study didn't just look at the low performers. What Dunning and Kruger found when they looked at the top performers is just as interesting. It's like the complete other side of the coin. So the people who did really well, the top quarter performers, they were way more accurate at guessing their score. But they had their own little bias. They tended to underestimate the ranking. Why? Because the test felt easy to them, so they just assumed it must have been easy for everybody. It's a classic case of thinking everyone else thinks and feels the same way you do. And that might actually sound kind of familiar. You see, while Dunning-Kruger is all about low-skilled people having way too much confidence, its flip side is something a lot of successful people deal with: imposter syndrome. That's where you're super confident, but you're constantly worried you're a fraud who's about to be found out. Both are just failures of self-assessment, just coming from opposite ends of the skill spectrum. Okay, now in the spirit of good science, we've got to ask the tough question. Is this effect really as solid as it sounds? Over the years, some critics have popped up, and it's really important to hear what they have to say. The main criticism is basically that this whole thing might just be a statistical illusion. It's an idea called regression to the mean. And the argument goes like this. Of course, the worst performers overestimate themselves. There's nowhere to go but up. And the best performers can mostly only underestimate. So is it a real psychological thing, or is it just noise in the data? Well, Dunning and the other researchers have a pretty strong answer. First off, they actually thought about this and addressed it in their original paper way back in '99. And since then, over 25 years of follow-up studies have pretty much confirmed it. While the statistical pattern is part of it, that core psychological piece, that lack of metacognition, is very real and has been shown again and again. The scientific consensus is, yeah, this effect holds up. Okay, so if this is something we're all vulnerable to, what in the world can we do about it? How do we actually get better at knowing what we don't know? Well, it all comes down to actively building that metacognitive muscle. Here are 4 really good strategies. 1, actually ask for honest, constructive feedback from people who will tell you the truth. 2, learn to be your own devil's advocate. Always ask yourself, how could I be wrong here? 3, constantly challenge how you know what you think you know. And finally, and this is the big one, just keep learning. It's a funny paradox. The more you know, the more you start to see just how much you don't know. And that leaves us with one final, kind of uncomfortable question to ask yourself. If the first rule of the club is that you don't know you're a member, what's one area in your life, right now, where you just might be blissfully, confidently unaware? Something to think about. That's our look at the Dunning-Kruger Effect. Subscribe to the channel and like, and also suggest your topics for future videos in the comments. Thanks so much for watching.